It was around 6:32 a.m. Aria Whitman was awakened by the itchy mattress beneath her. Her head felt as though it was split into two with a heavy blow, and a boatload of pain racked her entire body. The dilapidated, filthy wall showed she was in a place she would never go in. What's worse, she realized she had slept with a man for the first time. What happened? Aria screamed. Ethan, awoken by her loud voice, sat up on the bed, his toned body a beautiful sight to behold. "You were such a demon in bed last night." A red blush appeared on Aria's cheeks. "Slap." "What?" Ethan, not expecting the slap at all, exclaimed in a bewildered voice. "You! Who are you? And how did we get here?" Aria asked furiously, her beautiful hazel eyes boiling with anger. "Are you serious right now? I mean, you were the one who pounced on me last night. You could barely keep your hands off me." Ethan responded. Aria's face heated up from both anger and embarrassment at Ethan's words. She would never do something like that, especially with someone she didn't know. "You must have done something heinous to me," Aria accused, tears welling in the corner of her eyes. "Don't accuse me of something like that. I don't need to force anyone into bed. Moreover, you're the one who came to me. If you don't believe me, check the CCTV footage at the hotel's entrance. It'll show you who dragged who up here." Ethan retorted calmly. Aria wanted to reply, but a sharp pain shot through her head. The memories of what happened yesterday came back to her in full force. Marcus Langford, the rival Langford family, had invited her to a party on campus. He claimed that he wanted to get to know her better and also ease the tension between their two rival families. She accepted, trusting Marcus's words. However, it appeared that she had been too naive. Marcus had intended to deceive her from the start, and the minute she accepted a drink from him, she realized that she had been poisoned. She had tried to make her escape by excusing herself to the bathroom. However, on the way there, the effects of the poison acted up. It was when she was in such a vulnerable state that she encountered Ethan Blackwell. He was handsome, with a lean yet toned body, packing muscles in all the right places. She couldn't hold herself back and pounced on him. As the memories filled her mind, Aria felt her cheeks heat up both in embarrassment and shame at her actions. She was furious at herself for trusting Marcus, but there was nothing she could do now. The deed had been done. "I see you're starting to remember," Ethan said, watching her with an unreadable expression. "Shut up," Aria responded. "I have to go," Aria muttered, attempting to swing her legs over the side of the bed. Sadly, her body betrayed her, weak and sore from the effects of the poison and the events of the night before. Ethan remained silent and watched as Aria struggled to pick up her clothes and underwear littered in the room. Just as Aria was about to leave the room, Ethan's voice rang out. "I'll take responsibility for this." Aria froze, turning slowly to face him. "Responsibility? And how exactly will you do that?" Aria asked, a mocking smile on her face. "I will be your boyfriend," Ethan said firmly, his tone resolute. "In your wildest dreams," Aria sneered. Aria Whitman, was a renowned beauty at the prestigious Tussauds University, and her family, the Whitmans, held a dominant position in the local wine business. Given her family's wealth, it was no news she was surrounded by numerous wealthy suitors. "Do you even know who I am?" Aria asked coldly. "I don't know. I just transferred to Tussauds University. Still, I promise you that I will try my best to make you happy," Ethan replied. "Oh, spare me. I'm well aware of people like you. Find some rich fool to bail you out of your sorry life," Aria scoffed. Nonetheless, Ethan's response was calm yet firm. "Why don't you give me a chance? You must be delusional," her voice dripping with contempt. "You're not even worth the dirt under my shoes. I'm not who you think I am." Aria narrowed her eyes at Ethan. "I mean it," Ethan said firmly. She strongly disliked people like Ethan, who clearly spin lies about their capabilities to get on her good side. As a top beauty of the Tussauds University, meeting those kinds of people wasn't a new occurrence to her. You think you are funny, right? Aria scoffed, letting out a harsh laugh while glaring at him coldly. I'm not kidding. I can take care of you. She stared at him for a moment, unable to decide if she should pity him for being so delusional or feel irritated that he was wasting her time. Look, she finally said, shaking her head, leave me alone. The powerful people I know could make someone like you disappear without a second thought. Ethan chuckled softly. Is that so? They might want to be my friends once they know who I am. He didn't care about any powerful person she knew at all. Aria rolled her eyes at his response, and she felt her patience significantly run out at his words. You must be out of your mind. I'm not going to give you a single penny, and don't even think about using what happened last night against me. Keep your mouth shut about it. Or what? Ethan said, raising an eyebrow at her subtle threat. Or I'll make sure you regret it. Now get out of my sight. I don't want to see your face again. Aria threatened. Surprisingly, Ethan didn't argue with her. He simply watched her for a moment, a thoughtful look crossing his face before he stood, grabbing his own clothes and leaving the room. Ethan went into the lift, pressing the button to the ground floor. He hadn't mentioned it to Aria. She was poisoned by the lethal aphrodisiac. If he hadn't intervened, Aria would have died. Sleeping with her hadn't been his choice, it was the only way to save her life. He didn't waste his time explaining. Now the most important was finding the woman he was engaged to. That's the why he transferred here. The elevator dinged as it arrived on the ground floor, and when the doors slid open, a group of men, all dressed in sharp black suits, stood in a line, waiting for him. A middle-aged man, tall and imposing, stepped forward and bowed slightly. Master Ethan, welcome to Tussauds. Ethan's face remained impassive. Edward Crestwood, I told you to keep a low profile. Ethan said coldly. The middle-aged man straightened his posture before glancing around at the other men and motioning for them to disperse. I apologize, Master Ethan. We simply wanted to ensure your safety. Your father requested we make sure your time here at university is as discreet as possible. Edward offered a small smile and replied. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Discreet? And you brought a whole group of men in black? That doesn't seem very discreet to me. A temporary measure, I assure you. Edward dismissed the rest of the team with a wave. As the last of the men left, Edward pulled out a sleek, diamond-encrusted black card from his pocket and handed it to Ethan. This is your new card, Master Ethan. This card is the first of its kind in the world. There are no restrictions on the location or amount. It also has a 24-hour service for all your needs. Ethan glanced at the card but showed little interest. There's also a self-driving sports car waiting for you in the lot. Like the card, it is the very first of its kind and is filled with phenomenal features. Edward added, although he could see Ethan wasn't particularly impressed by the car and any of the features he mentioned. I don't need it, Ethan replied coldly. Understood, Master Ethan. Edward nodded in affirmation. He had also arranged a beautiful villa for Ethan, but from his earlier actions, he was confident that he would instantly reject the offer. Therefore, he did not bother mentioning it to him. Please at least accept this card, you will find it useful. Ethan nodded and tucked the card into his pocket. Will you now tell me the real reason why you came all the way here to find me? Edward stared at Ethan with a look of surprise on his face. He did not expect Ethan to see through him so easily. Are you not going to answer me? Edward jolted a bit before begging in a tone filled with desperation. Please, Master Ethan, you have to save my daughter. Edward pleaded. I have tried everything possible. His voice faltered as he spoke, his eyes filled with hopelessness. Please, Master Ethan, I'm not sure how much time she has any longer. Ethan exhaled slowly. I'll meet her tomorrow. What? Edward blinked, taken aback by Ethan's swift agreement. After all, the rumors he had heard about the young man had painted a different picture for him. Not only his unfathomable family background, but also his unparalleled medical skills. He had inherited his family's mysterious abilities, capable of healing patients on the verge of death. Now that Ethan had accepted his request, his daughter might finally be saved. "Thank you very much, Master Ethan. I will never forget this favor." Edward expressed his enthusiasm with a deep bow, unable to contain his gratitude. "Save it. Besides, I want you to do something for me." Ethan waved a hand, cutting off Edward's show of appreciation. "What is it?" Edward was ready to do anything Ethan demanded. Ethan dipped his hand into his pockets and brought out a ring. It was an ordinary ring at first glance, with no standout features. "I want you to find the owner of this ring. The owner of that ring saved my life, and I heard the person is nearby." When compared to saving his daughter, finding someone seemed to be a straightforward task. "Consider it done," Edward said, his voice firm. With his Crestwood Group resources, he believed that he would find the person in no time. Ethan nodded slightly at David's response. He had transferred to Tussauds University for 2 reasons. The first reason was that he needed to find his fiancée. As for the second, that would have to wait until Edward found the ring's owner. "Good." Just as Ethan turned to leave, Edward called out to him. "Master Ethan, I was thinking of throwing a party. All the students of Tussauds University will be there. Big names, popular singers, as well as DJs, would be present." Edward offered. "Not interested." Ethan declined icily and left. Away from the hotel, Ethan hailed a taxi and gave the taxi driver the address. Ethan had a strong gut feeling that his fiancée would be the key to uncovering the truth surrounding his mother's death. The taxi rolled to a stop in front of an impressive villa. However, he had barely started walking when a familiar voice appeared. "You again? How did you find me here?" It was the lady from the hotel. Her pretty face instantly twisted with contempt. "Are you stalking me?" "Stalking? What are you talking about?" Ethan asked in annoyance. "Don't act innocent. You must have been following me for you to end up here." Aria scoffed, crossing her arms indignantly. "I didn't follow you here. I'm here for business." Ethan replied calmly. "As if. What business could you possibly have here? Perhaps someone you can con into paying your bills." Aria sneered. Ethan took a deep breath, his patience thinning. "I don't care about your money, nor am I here for you," Ethan said in a gritted voice. "You better leave now, stalker, or I'll call security." Without bothering to reply to him anymore, she stormed inside the villa, a flicker of confusion appearing on his face. Ethan brought out a piece of paper and double-checked the address on it. After confirming that he had the right address, he followed her inside the villa. Aria stormed inside the villa, her heels clacking angrily against the polished marble floor. However, just as she turned to close the door, she saw Ethan casually walking inside the villa just behind her. "Are you insane? What do you think you are doing right now?" Aria snapped, her voice laden with irritation and anger. "Are you going to keep up your stalker activities here?" "I'm here to meet someone," Ethan replied calmly. "Oh? And who exactly are you here to meet?" Aria instantly crossed her arms, glaring at him. "My fiancée, Aria Whitman," Ethan replied firmly. The words hit Aria like a sledgehammer. For a moment, she couldn't form any words. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. I'm here to see my fiancée, Aria Whitman." "That's impossible, because I'm Aria Whitman." "What?" Ethan exclaimed. This time around, it was his turn to reel from the shock of her words. Very uncomfortable and apprehensive silence filled the luxurious hallway as they stared at each other, both barely processing the gravity of what had just been revealed. However, a new voice broke the stillness. "Ah, Ethan, there you are." An elderly man, dressed in a fine red suit, went into the room with a warm smile. "Grandfather? You know this man?" Aria asked in disbelief. Henry Whitman, the elderly man, smiled at his granddaughter, then turned his full attention to Ethan. "Your father told me you'd be here today, so I'm glad to see you found your way in." Ethan gave a polite nod to the elder. "I'm glad you have met each other." After all, the engagement between you and Aria is a match made in heaven. Henry clapped his hands together, completely oblivious to the tension in the air. Grandfather, wait. There's been some kind of mistake. No, Lily, Henry interrupted, smiling as though he hadn't heard her. Today's an important day for both of you. Inform your parents that the engagement is officially happening. Grandfather, you can't be serious, Aria protested, panic rising in her. Aria, this is what's best for you. For the family. Henry said, his warm expression hardening slightly. Ethan, on the other hand, remained silent, watching the entire exchange with an unreadable expression. He didn't want this engagement any more than Aria did, but he couldn't call off the engagement now. Henry gently guided Ethan toward the main hall. Aria's thoughts were spinning rapidly. She absolutely had to find a way out of this. There was no way she was going to be engaged to such a poor person like Ethan. Just as Henry was about to add another word about the engagement, another voice interrupted. I object to this engagement, declared Margaret Whitman, Aria's grandmother. Margaret, what are you talking about? Aria will marry Gregory Holden, Margaret declared in a firm voice. Gregory Holden? That hypocrite's son? You must be out of your mind. Henry sneered, his voice filled with disdain. Margaret remained unflinching at her husband's harsh words. Greg is a fine young man, and he works for Crestwood family. It is surely a connection that will be invaluable to us one day. Henry shook his head. The Crestwood family may be powerful, but Greg himself is nothing. His father is a mere lackey who can't even manage his own affairs. He's more respectable than that boy you've brought in. Margaret shot back, her voice rising as she pointed toward Ethan. Respectable, my foot. Greg will never be part of this family, Henry stated firmly, his words final. Just as the argument between the two hit its peak, Aria's parents emerged from the side hall. Father. Edward began to say, casting a sideways glance at Ethan's poor appearance. Look at him. He's hardly fitting for Aria. Yes, father. He looks so unkempt. Eloise quickly followed her husband's lead. Enough. I am the head of this family, and I have made my decision. Ethan is Aria's fiancé, and that is final. Henry declared angrily. You're making a mistake, Henry. A terrible mistake. Margaret's face flushed with anger, her voice trembling as she spoke. Henry, unshaken by his wife's words, turned toward his granddaughter. Aria, take Ethan on a tour of the campus. It's time you got to know him properly. Aria's expression soured as though she had eaten a fly, but she forced a smile, knowing better than to outrightly defy her grandfather in front of everyone. Of course, grandfather. I'll be happy to show him around. She said it sweetly, but her eyes glinted with malice. As Aria and Ethan left the room, her sweet demeanor immediately disappeared. Listen to me, she hissed, turning on Ethan with fire in her eyes. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but let me make one thing clear, I will never marry you. Look here, Aria. I'm not here to force anything on you. But... Before Ethan could get another word in, Aria walked off and approached a sleek, black Porsche. The car's door opened, and a beautiful girl stepped out. Her designer outfit clung tightly to her slim figure, and every inch of her oozed wealth and privilege. This is my best friend, Natalie. Aria said. Ethan extended a polite hand. Nice to meet you. Natalie didn't even look at his outstretched hand. Her eyes flicked up and down, taking in his simple clothes with a disgusted sneer. So, this is the guy? She asked, her voice dripping with contempt. Ethan withdrew his outstretched hands, but he didn't comment on it. After all, he had no interest in playing their petty games. We're heading to Gregory Holden party. You should come, Aria said. Why not? Ethan shrunk his shoulders. Come on, it'll be fun. Besides, Greg is dying to meet you. Natalie said in a nice tone. But actually she had told Greg earlier. Greg was going to let Ethan know the result of stealing his girl. Everyone at Tussauds University knew the name Gregory Holden. Greg was the golden boy, wealthy, powerful, and deeply entrenched in the school's elite. More than that, everyone believed Aria and Greg were destined to end up together. "Let's go. We don't want to be late," Aria urged as they got into Natalie's car. The party Aria mentioned was being held at one of the most exclusive clubs in town. It was a club that was reserved for the wealthy and privileged only, and it was extremely hard for an average person to get in. As they approached the entrance, the towering metal doors slid open automatically for the guests. Ethan tried to follow, but the doors slammed shut just before he could step through, blocking his way. Two large security guards who stood at the entrance noticed his situation. "You lost, buddy?" one of them asked, crossing his arms. "Only members get through those doors," the other guard chimed in, smirking. "And you don't look like you belong here." The guards chuckled, clearly enjoying the moment. "Listen, kid, why don't you save yourself the embarrassment and head home?" Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed the customer service number embossed on the back of his black unlimited card. A friendly but professional voice answered immediately. "Welcome to Zenith. How can I assist you?" the voice asked professionally. "I need my membership registered for tonight's event at a club called Oasis," Ethan said, his tone firm but calm. The process took less than a minute. With a level of efficiency only the most elite memberships could offer, the operator confirmed his registration. He walked back to the entrance of the underground club. The two security guards who had taunted him earlier were still standing there, now looking a little less amused as he approached. Ethan swiped his card across the door panel, and the metal doors slid open without hesitation. The guards blinked in surprise. "Wait," the taller guard said, stepping forward. "That can't be right. The system must have." Ethan calmly pulled out the black membership card and held it up for them to see. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, still doubtful. "Check it," Ethan said. His voice was soft, but there was a sharp edge to it that made them hesitate. They ran the card through their system, and were ready to throw Ethan out with injuries if it turned out that he was wasting their time. However, just seconds later, confirmation of Ethan's highest-level membership appeared on their screens, and the guards' smug expressions dropped instantly. Without hesitation, they dropped to their knees, panic overtaking them. "We're so sorry for not recognizing you. Please, forgive us." The guards stood frozen. They had just made a grave mistake by mocking someone of such stature. The consequences were unimaginable. He could be fired, and his family would pay the price. "You saw nothing, right?" Alex's voice was cold, like steel. Ethan nodded and walked past them without sparing them another word. They weren't worth his time after all. Inside, the underground fight club was buzzing with energy. The crowd roared with excitement as holographic displays flickered in the air, showing real-time rankings of top fighters from around the world. Aria and Natalie were seated near the front, laughing amongst themselves. They barely noticed Ethan as he walked in. "Looks like the guards let him in because of us," Aria said, assuming her presence had somehow opened the doors for him. Still, she was somewhat disappointed that the guards at the door hadn't given him a tough time. She had hoped that he would be beaten mercilessly by them before being thrown out. Meanwhile, Greg was in the center of the arena, basking in the cheers of the crowd. He had just finished his match, effortlessly defeating his opponent and improving his global ranking once again. On the holographic leaderboard, his name flashed near the top, marking him as the highest-ranked fighter in the city. The crowd roared his name, but when Greg spotted Ethan, a sneer formed on his face. Well, look who finally made it," Greg called out, his voice booming across the arena. The crowd hushed as they turned to see who Greg was taunting. Ethan didn't flinch under the attention. He met Greg's mocking gaze with cool indifference. Greg wiped the sweat from his brow, still grinning. "You know, I've heard a lot about you, Ethan. Not exactly the guy someone like Aria deserves, don't you think?" His words were laced with contempt. Ethan didn't respond, but a flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes. Greg chuckled, encouraged by the reaction. "Let's be real, man. You can't seriously think you have a shot with her. You're just a nobody, and this whole engagement thing is a joke. The crowd began to jeer, egging Greg on. Ethan stood there silently, letting Greg's words bounce off him, his expression unfazed. Look at you, Greg continued, stepping forward. Do you even have enough money to get her a decent meal? Or is she going to have to start paying for your dinners too? Ethan wasn't one to let insults get under his skin. You talk a lot for someone who's hiding behind a reputation that barely holds up, Ethan finally said, his voice cutting through the noise. Greg's grin faltered for a moment. The crowd gasped at Ethan's boldness, their jeers dying down to murmurs of curiosity. What did you say? Greg's tone darkened. You heard me. Ethan took a step forward, his gaze hardening. You can mock my engagement, but it doesn't change the fact that it's real. And as for me being a nobody, well, I wouldn't be so sure about that if I were you. The crowd tensed, sensing a confrontation brewing. Greg's face twisted in anger as he took a step closer to Ethan. All right then, tough guy. Let's settle this. Greg sneered. How about a fight? If you lose, you break off the engagement and leave Aria for good. But if, by some miracle, I lose, then you can stay, and we'll all pretend you belong here. Greg proposed, laughing at the absurdity of his own proposal. Fight! Fight! The crowd erupted into cheers, clearly excited for the fight. This bet isn't worth fighting for. Is that Lamborghini at the door yours? If you lose, the car is mine. Ethan S.